We're now going to change gears from the software to the hardware of Compass Control. This is part one of Compass Control, Master Controllers and Hardware, and we're going to start off with our KD MC1000 Master Controller. This is a network-based product, of course, because Compass Control is a network-based control system. So when you look at this, and if you look at it physically, have it in your hands, you'll notice it's not a very large product. It is more of a shelf mount product versus a rack mount product. But the reason we did that is because it makes it so flexible. For example, if you have a centralized equipment rack and you need to install 1, 2, 5, 10 of these in the rack, you can do so. Or if you have conference application, let's say, and you have an MC1000, and each room has its own MC1000, perhaps in furniture or in the table, for example, you're able to do that more easily having one of these located per zone versus centrally because of its small stature. So what is on this thing? Well, on the face of the unit, you do have your USB connection, which is used when you're using our Master Controller Device Manager software to get the latest firmware and to set up your IP. Also, you have an IR learning window there on the front center. Very, very useful for learning new IR remote control codes, which, as we mentioned earlier, does have to happen from time to time, even though we have 160,000 different code sets. So what we always suggest is that your company has an MC1000 in your possession as your company unit, because it is going to be a big benefit to you if you can do testing, but also your IR learning in the office ahead of time. Compass Control isn't typically something you want to do on site because, programming is a time-consuming thing. So moving further to the right, you have the multifunction ports 1 through 6. And with these multifunction ports, these actually they're activated by voltage passing through their respective multifunction ports on the rear. So the LEDs only illuminate if the ports on the rear execute a command or voltage. So there's no programming which tells these lights to illuminate. It's a great troubleshooting mechanism. So for example, in the world of IR, infrared, you're accustomed to having blinking IR emitters. And those emitters blink when voltage passes through. It's a great troubleshoot. Yes, some command is passing through. But in the world of RS-232, that's not a luxury you get. And so this is a way, if a device doesn't respond to a command, you can begin by testing or troubleshooting, looking at, does a command actually execute? Well, yes, voltage is passing through as indicated by one of the lights, 1 through 5, blinking there. Which brings us to the rear of the unit, and we'll start with these 6 multifunction ports. We call them MCP35, multifunction control port 3.5 millimeter. They are 3.5 millimeter stereo connectors, IR, RS-232, bidirectional, and voltage triggering and sensing. So very, very flexible there. We'll get into that in a moment. There is a relay, a 3-port relay, so you could have normally open, normally closed settings. There is a Zigbee RS-232 port. Now that there's a special accessory that ships with the MC1000 that is a 3.5 millimeter 3-ring 4 conductor. So it's got an extra contact versus a stereo connector. And that's because that Zigbee port, when it was used with our Zigbee antenna, when we had the handheld remote, that Zigbee antenna required power as well. So it's bidirectional communication, transmit, receive, ground, and power for the Zigbee antenna. Of course, that's going to be a non-connect when you use with the RS-232 adapter. However, so you actually have 7 control ports, one there being a dedicated RS-232. And the network port, TCP/IP, is, of course, how the iPads will communicate iPad and Android, I should say, will communicate to the network, to the KD MC1000, and tell it, as the brain, the iOS device and Android device, tell it, here's what you need to do in very, very small packets. It tells it okay, execute this IR burst or this RS-232 string out of ports 1 through 6, for example. Similarly, though, the MC1000 can actually execute commands and put those back onto the network in the network switch and in the router. And that's useful if you have a device that, again, as we mentioned earlier, perhaps is a single socket device, meaning it only supports a single device to be connected or to create an active network socket with it at that time. And that's a very nice feature of the MC1000 there.